Can I start? Okay.
Yes, Maharaj.
Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. So, we were discussing the 18th verse of the 10th chapter, which is also known as Vibhuti Yoga. The 18th verse was over. That is the last verse of this part of the chapter, where Arjuna is trying to tell Sri Krishna, Vistarena Atmano Yogam Vibhutim cha Janardana Bhuya Kataya Triptirhi Shrunvato Nasti Me Mritam. Vistarena means in great detail, by the power of your yoga. Yoga here means the great mystic power which you possess. With the help of that, you show me your glory, vibhutim cha. You show both the powers of your yoga and also the glory. Janardana is the name of Sri Krishna. Bhuya, again tell me for my contentment. Triptihi, shrunvataha, because I am not tired of hearing what the glories of the Lord are uh, your life infusing words. That is the idea. Amrutam, the life infusing words which you are uttering, they are wonderful, and I wish to hear it again and again. Even if I know them, I wish to hear it from your mouth. So that is what we discussed last time. So that verse is over. So Janardana means one who is adored by people, both for earthly enjoyments as well as for emancipation, for mukti. Because the very purpose of the Lord showing his powers is that he works at various levels. Not that everybody aspires to have mukti as or emancipation as the highest goal. Many people live for lesser ideals also. So he fulfills their respective needs. As people approach him with different needs, he fulfills those needs, which includes earthly enjoyments. But he doesn't take the responsibility. He does it in a detached way, because the karma, the cause, will give rise to some effects which he has predetermined. So he doesn't, though uh, he is adored by people even for earthly enjoyments, but the consequences of earthly enjoyments are clearly told by the Lord, that those who strive for that, they get it, no doubt, but along with that, as they say, happiness comes with a crown of sorrow on its head. So that is what the Lord is warning here. But at the same time, Arjuna wants to know both, because he is not done with earthly enjoyments. Otherwise, why would he fight the war? And Sri Krishna knows that he has come to a stage of life where he needs to develop that kind of vairagya, that kind of desire for emancipation. Now, that desire for emancipation is not something which comes, it comes at the right time, when one is done away with the not only the gross but even the subtle enjoyments, earthly or even heavenly enjoyments. When one is done with that, when one is satiated with that, then only a person, a sadhaka or an aspirant, will try for emancipation. So yoga here, when you says when Arjuna is asking Sri Krishna, tell me in great detail of your yoga powers and also the attributes. What he means by vibhuti means attributes, the wonderful attributes that the Lord possesses. So here yoga means, doesn't mean the highest yoga, but it indicates the power to know and handle things properly. So yoga karmasu kaushalam, that is one definition of yoga in a gross way. It is how you handle different things properly. Yoga maya. It is also used in the sense of maya. So here it has been used not as the highest yoga, Patanjali's yoga, but that power to know things in depth and also handle this wonderful creation of yours. So that is what he means. I want to know your yoga, the powers of your yoga, and also the powers and also the attributes, the vibhuti. This chapter has been named as Vibhuti Yoga. So one of the reasons why Arjuna is asking, when being a person who is not yet done with earthly enjoyments and who still is aspiring for some kind of powers to enable him to win the battle. But these vibhutis, if they remind Arjuna of the Lord, as Sri Krishna has mentioned in the previous verse, I am just giving you a glimpse of my glory, a small fraction of my real glory, which is very difficult to understand. But I still will give you a kind of sample of the real glory that I possess. And even that, Arjuna says, these attributes will remind every human being of him. When he sees there are certain things which the Lord can do through his miraculous powers, he uh, looks up to the Lord for higher and higher things and progressively goes towards emancipation. But as Sri Ramakrishna said, that the path, everybody doesn't seek the highest. It's not possible that everybody will seek emancipation or moksha. So even absorption in the attributes of vibhutis of God is as good as absorption in him, because these vibhutis belong to him. So when with that attitude, if you meditate on the different attributes of the Lord, that is what we are supposed to do when we take up some the form of the reality which we call Satchidananda, who has taken a particular form. Now that form will have some attributes, and those attributes are to be meditated upon. That is what Srimad Bhagavata and all the other devotional scriptures tell you. There are many ways of approaching the highest truth. The highest emancipation will come through different paths for different people. And one of the paths is to meditate on the glories, which of course every human being knows. Ishvara is, or Bhagavan, the word Bhagavan itself has come from the 6 great powers which he possesses, which are not possible or which a ordinary jiva or human being does not possess. So even thinking of those powers, gradually a person who is addicted to some kind of powers or all the glory of the Lord, the external glory of the Lord, if he really meditates on him and thinks that these powers belong to Ishvara by virtue of his being an avatara, then it leads to the same emancipation, though it may take time. So one need not always meditate, or one cannot always meditate on the formless aspect. We begin with form, and when we get absorbed in whatever form we think he possesses, and also meditate on the vibhutis, these meditations lead us to absorption in his real nature. Then the real nature of the Lord through his grace is revealed to us. So the avatara is like a doorway. You know that this is the doorway to the formless aspect of Brahman. But since we cannot conceive through our limited minds, through our limited capacity, we can only think of forms. So we can think of the door. We do not know what is beyond that door. But that doorway to the Brahman is what is hinted here. So these vibhutis are just meditations. In the Upanishad also, in all of the Upanishads, you have different types of upasanas which are known as meditations. Upasana has a different connotation in the Upanishads. It means different meditations on the glory of the Lord or Prakriti. So Prakriti demonstrate before us certain mysterious powers, and when you do upasana on that, with the hope of realizing the Brahman, the substratum of all those vibhutis, then you reach Brahman. That is what upasana, saguna upasana means in the Upanishads. So here also Jivatma grows increasingly in divinity as he dwells on these divine attributes of the Paramatma. That is what happens. and slowly, gradually, but surely, as he goes on meditating on the different attributes of the Lord, ultimately he reaches the Lord. The relationship, as we saw, between the Jivatma and the Ishvara is like that between iron filings and the magnet. So, spontaneously the Ishvara, through his glories, though it's like a magnet, it attracts, the vibhutis attract a person, and when he goes near, he becomes one with that Ishvara, and then he realizes the highest goal of life, and he gets moksha. So what are those vibhutis? We discussed up to verse number 18. Now 19 to 40, Sri Krishna now starts explaining. Till now Arjuna is asking him different questions and are requesting him to show his vibhutis, but now from 19 to 40, we discussed last time, we will be discussing about the glories of the Lord as declared by the Lord himself. It has come through the mouth of the Lord himself. So Sri Bhagavanu Vacha, that the next few verses begin with the Sri Bhagavanu Vacha, Hanta te kathayishyami divya hi atma vibhutayah pradhanyatah kuru sreshta. Kuru sreshta is Arjuna's. There are so many adjectives used for Arjuna. Kurus means he is the sreshta among the Kurus. So he is defining. Pradhanyatah kuru sreshta nasti anta vistarasya me. So what it means? Hanta means now. Hanta te. To you now I will declare. Kathayishyami, I will declare. Divya, divine glories. Atma vibhutaya, my divine glories. Vibhuti is glories. Atma means my Ishvara's divine glories. So in their prominence, not the full glory, but the most prominent among the glories. Because it's not possible to describe each and every glory of the Lord. They are so innumerable. So he's just giving him a few samples. Pradhanyatah, that those which are the main ones, the prominent ones. Kuru Sreshta, best of the Kurus, that is Arjuna's. He is addressing him as the best among the Kurus. So the Kuru clan was made of both Pandavas and Kauravas, and he is the best among them according to Sri Krishna. Na asti means there is no end. There is no na asti antah vistarasya me. All the details, if I start explaining to you, there is no end to that, but I'll give you a few hints. That's what the Blessed Lord said. So he says, very well, now I shall tell you my divine glories according to their prominence. O best of the Kurus, there is no end to the details or the vibhutis which of details of my manifesto. There are so many details, but I'll describe a few. So the splendors that we see in nature, Prakriti, which is the creation of Ishvara, are all verily the different attributes of Ishvara. So it is impossible for Ishvara himself to recount them all. Here you should remember, Sri Ramakrishna also once was describing many visions and experiences that he had. And people were eager, because these things you will not find in the scriptures. Many things in the gospel, you will find Sri Ramakrishna was very restless to explain all the visions he had to the best of his capacity. And he was really keen to explain the wonderful visions he had. And there was no other way other people could know it, because it needs a incarnation to explain his own glories fully, and also based on his experiences. But then he used to say, I don't know why, but whenever I try to explain, I want to tell you everything, but somehow the mother, the divine mother, holds my neck and the voice does not come out. She holds me and does not allow the voice to be heard. That means the splendors which are there are which we see in nature. All the splendors are all attributes or vibhutis of Ishvara. But it is impossible for Ishvara himself, even if he wishes, to recount them all. a few specimens only can be mentioned. So that is the purpose of this verse. He says, I'm just giving you a sample or a few specimens. So his infinitude can be inferred. So there is a thing in logic which is known as anumana. So when you see the smoke, you make a anumana that there should be fire somewhere. So you don't have to see the fire to see. Once you see the smoke, you know there is some fire which has caused the smoke. So that connection, that inference, through inference you try to know. I will just give you a hint or a few specimens, and you using those specimens as the evidence, you try to infer the truth. And of course, the highest experiences have to be realized. They cannot just be understood through inference. That is not a good pramana. Though it may be good to begin with. We infer certain things based on the scriptural study that we do. But the actual knowledge, revelation, is far, far superior. The actual experience is something totally different than what we understand or what we infer from our understanding of the scriptures. So to define God, Sri Ramakrishna says in the gospel, to define God from our on the basis of our scriptural knowledge is like defining. Sri Ramakrishna, he tells in such a beautiful way that immediately it convinces you and shows the relative importance of just scriptural learning in our path. So he says to define God, or to understand God from scriptural knowledge, is like defining the holy city of Banaras after getting an idea of it from the map. So we have all seen maps. Sri Ramakrishna also, perhaps a map was shown to him, though he did not go to school or university. He had visited the museum. He visited many places, very curious. Though once somebody asked him, you never read books, but how do you quote from these different books? So he laughed and said, who said I can't read, but that doesn't, I do not read. He could read, of course, he could write also. But he said, I don't need to read because so many people come and tell me so many things. So many Pandits have come. Because when Sri Ramakrishna was doing his sadhana, when none of these direct disciples and the householder disciples had even started coming, this was before 80, except Hriday and Holy Mother and a few people who were in Dakshineshwar, know that how many scholars, Vaishnava Charan and the Gauri Pandit, so many scholars came, there were discussions, and Sri Ramakrishna used to, like a small child, enjoy them when they were discussing from different points of view. Even Bhairavi Brahmani was so adept in many of the scriptures. She used to tell, and he used to ask her, do the Shastras support what I just saw? And she used to tell, no, this is known as this bhava. So he had heard. He says, how much have I heard? So you have to understand that one should not think that he had no access to all these scriptures because he could not read and write. He didn't have the patience to do that. But the gurus came, the teachers came by themselves. The scriptures came to him. He did not have to run after them. The scriptural explanations, he first experienced them, as Latu Maharaj did. In his vision, he saw what Angushta Matra Purusha. He once said, when Swamiji had made it compulsory for all the monks to attend the classes. Every day there would be some scriptural study. And Latu Maharaj also, though he did not know anything of, even his Bengali was not so good, but he used to sit in a corner and just listen. One day, Swami Shuddhanandji was explaining. Sudhir, his name was Sudhir, he later became, he was the general secretary also, but he used to take class. He was a great scholar. And many monks, all those who were present in Belur Math had to attend. That was Swamiji's rule. So Latu Maharaj was also sitting there. And then Shuddhanandji was teaching the Kathopanishad to the novices and also to all the other monks, whoever was free, they had come. So he just mentioned that the Jivatma glows in the center of the heart, of the size Angushta Matra. It is of the size of the thumb. So Yama is telling Nachiketa that occurs in the Kathopanishad. Now, he was trying to explain in the Sanskrit verses in simple Bengali, and Latu Maharaj just jumped up. He was just sitting in a corner. He was not understanding most of the other uh, commentary of Shankaracharya and all. But when he mentioned this, he immediately jumped up and started shouting. He said, Sudhir thik bolche. Sudhir is telling the right thing. Sudhir was the name of Shuddhanandji, Sudhir Maharaj. So he says, Sudhir is saying the right thing. And he doesn't stop. Like an excited child, when the child discovers something wonderful, he just can't control himself. So like that, Latu Maharaj goes again and again and again. He said, what you said is exactly the same thing. Because he had, even before, he had even come across this verse in the Kathopanishad, he had heard it, he had already seen it. There was some kind of realization. So that tallied with the scriptures, and that made him excited. And he was convinced that this is what the Kathopanishad says, and I already had that vision. So for some people, it is like having the vision first and then seeing it on the map. Whereas for most others, first you come through the scriptures, try to get a conception of truth, and then meditate on that, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, and then finally realize that. That is a way for most of the people. But sometimes some exceptions are there, like Latu Maharaj, even Sri Ramakrishna. He had most of his experiences. Later, the different gurus of different sampradayas came. Mostly they came just to support what visions he had, or maybe tell him, but he had most of the experiences even before that, without any of these teachers. But later on they came and they corroborated what the scriptures say about this. Many of the, if you read the Leela Prasang, the great master, you will find so many wonderful visions which Sri Ramakrishna had, and whenever he had them, these Bhairavi Brahmani or others, they used to say, oh, the scriptures say like this, the scriptures say, and they confirmed it, that this is what many others who performed sadhana through this path have experienced. So what you have experienced is true. So here, the truth about the universe has to be known at the very outset. That is what this verse, and that truth can be known by the words, through the words of the Lord. Now he says, I am telling you my vibhuti. Try to meditate on that, and then as you go on meditating, things will become more and more clear. So in the outset itself, he says, Aham Atma Gudakesha. So in every verse, he is addressing Arjuna with a different name. Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhuta Ashaya Sthitaha Aham Adischa Madhyam Cha Bhutanam Anta Evacha. I, Aham, when he says Aham, when Swamiji says the self, I am that Brahman, when he said that, he spoke from a totally different level. It was not the ordinary ego. Unfortunately, when we say I am the Atman, what comes to our mind is the silly little ego, because we have not yet got rid of that. And that is why sometimes it makes us vain. The same thing happened to Swami Abhedananda. When Swamiji touched him, he suddenly got an interest in the formless aspect of Brahman. And he started killing the fish and doing all sorts of things, saying, I am Brahman, what does it matter? When he had really not got rid of the silly ego that he had. And then Sri Ramakrishna scolded him. What do you mean by this? You can't just, before you realize that you are the Atman, or really experience that, just by saying that I am the Brahman and whether I kill, who kills whom, and all those things, these are highest forms of knowledge, and they have to be realized first, and then one will understand the significance of that. You are doing it right from the beginning, which is not correct. This is not the correct Vedanta that you are following. So similarly, when Sri Krishna is saying Aham Atma Gudakesha, he is talking from the highest point of view. Sarva, what kind of Atma? It's not the Jivatma. Not like when the Lord says Aham Atma, it is when we say Aham Atma, it means Jivatma, the Antaratma, which we are trying to identify or unite with the Paramatma. But for when the Ishvara himself says Aham Atma Gudakesha, Gudakesha is the name of uh, Arjuna. Gudakesha means one who has conquered sleep. That is, one who has conquered sleep is also known as Gudakesha. So Arjuna was supposed to, he did so much of tapasya that he practically conquered sleep. That is why he has been addressed as Gudakesha. So he says Sarva Bhuta Ashaya Sthita. Sarva Bhuta Ashaya Sthita means seated in the heart of all beings. So that self, that Antaryami, Antaryamin is the word. Antaryami is what Ishvara is. If you consider him to be the immanent reality in the world, as the transcendent reality is Brahman, but as the immanent reality, he is the Antaryami. So that is why he says, Sarva Bhuta Ashaya Sthita, I am seated in the heart. So you have to meditate, you have to try to see him through the heart. And when he reveals himself fully, then that meditation leads to you a state where you see him not only in your own heart, but in the hearts of all. So he is giving him a hint that first try to see me in your heart, meditate on that. And if you meditate on that, then you will understand that I am not only sitting in your hearts, but in the hearts of all. Sarva Bhuta, all the beings. Aham Adischa, I am in the beginning, I am the middle, and I am the end of all creatures. So whether the creature is just has been born, or it is the beginning, Adi, or its middle, the creation, the maintenance, or the second part which enables the created being to exist for some time, and then finally it gets destroyed. That destruction also, Anta of the Bhuta. Bhuta means the all beings which are temporary, the gross beings, gross or subtle, both. So they have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have the end also. So I am all, I am in the beginning as Atman, as the Sarva Bhuta Ashaya Sthita. I am seated in the heart, even in the beginning of creation. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. So the Lord is the innermost self in all beings, which are his gross manifestation. The effect is nothing but cause in another form. The Lord is the material as well as the efficient cause of the universe. So that is a very big problem which has been solved. Other Semitic theologies, if you see, they say God created, he took the materials and then one fine day he just created. That is a kind of fallacy. It is not true. He cannot be they compare the Lord as a pot maker, makes pot. He takes the clay which is lying and then he bakes it and makes a pot. So Vedanta does not believe in that. The Lord here says he is the material as well as he is the material cause also. I am the Lord is the material as well as the efficient. The potter may cause a pot to be made, but the potter himself is not, we do not expect the potter himself to be the clay. But here the Lord is the clay as well as the maker of the pot, both. He is the efficient as well as the material cause. From him only the universe has come. So the one who is awakened in the Jivatma, that is in the self, can recognize this fact that Ishvara is putting on the appearance of the visible universe. So Sri Ramakrishna had these wonderful experiences. So he used a different type of language. He used the language of the Tantra, where he says, it is my cosmic mother. Whether you call it Ishvara or the cosmic mother, it's just a terminology is different. Who has become everything. She of omnipotence has become the universe and the beings. She herself has become the universe. She is the material cause also, and she causes this universe to be created. She is the material as well as efficient cause. So that is why in Tantras, we have a idea or a small syllable which is known as the bija. So the bija, most of the bijas, whether there are hundreds of bijas representing different deities in different forms, But the essence of that bija is that there is creation, there is sustenance, there is destruction. Destruction of what? Destruction of sorrow. The bija is supposed to destroy the gross to replace it with the spirit. So when we want spiritual, or when we want to touch our spirit or establish our spiritual identity, we have to remove the gross. But our karmas are so vast, our karmashaya is so vast that it needs some extra energy or extra support to negate it or to nullify its effect. So what you do, you utter the bija, the cosmic mother who is supposed to be condensed into this bija. That is the idea of tantras. So they say that it is the whole universe is condensed. She creates, when the universe is created, the gross forms are manifest, and then we have sorrow. Then we need to remove that sorrow. So with the destruction of ignorance, that sorrow is removed. That is the whole idea of spiritual sadhana. So she reveals herself as the body first, the intellect, the spiritual pursuit, everything. Her avidya maya takes us towards the gross, her vidya maya takes us towards the spirit. So Sri Ramakrishna tries to combine Vedanta and Tantra here, saying Shakti and Brahman are one. So this is a very important statement, that which we call as Shakti, the manifest universe, is inherent or is potential in Brahman. When that Brahman is inactive or when it is pure consciousness, it is not manifest. It is Brahman, but when it manifests, it becomes Shakti. But so Shakti and Brahman are two sides of the same coin. In the manifest state, she is Shakti. In the absolute state, she is Brahman. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna says in Kathamrut. So now we come to the 21st verse where he is giving some specimens now. So I am Adityanam Aham Vishnu. I will try to find out what he means by these different deities. Now he is giving some, as I told you, he has promised Arjuna that he will show that wherever his manifestation is the greatest. That is why Sri Ramakrishna, once somebody asked him, why do you go and visit these prominent people? He says, those who have some greatness, vibhutis, they are because the Lord has given him. So whenever a person is prominent for some reason, for it is the glory of the God that is manifest. He may not know it. Out of egoism, he may think that he is great. But I go to see them because I see the glory of the Lord. So that is the attitude with which these verses have to be studied. Verse number 21. Onwards, we will get a beautiful description of the different aspects of nature, and among them, what is the greatest among those species or those beings. So Aditya is a species. We'll try to find out what it means. First, let us read the verse. Adityanam aham Vishnu Jyotisham Ravi Anshuman. Anshuman, that is the name of Jyotisham in among the Jyotishas. Marichir Marutam Asmi Nakshatranam Aham Shashi. So what it means is, first we'll discuss the meaning of it. Adityanam, among all the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Jyotisham, not Vishnu as in the Vishnu Sahasranama. You have to know that. This is a specific thing known as Vishnu. Now, a specific state of being which is known as Vishnu. Marutanam, among, Ravihi Anshuman. I am the sun. Ravi means sun. I am the sun among all the radiant things, because sun is the most brightest object, at least that which we can perceive. There are stars much more brighter than the sun, but since for our perception, for our meditation, we have to consider the brightest among all the radiant things. Anshuman, that is that which is radiant, is known as Anshuman. So above Ravi, I am Ravi in Anshuman. There are other lights, but Ravi is the brightest. Marichi Marutam. Marichi Marutam Asmi means I am the, Marut means wind. There are different kinds of wind, and each of the type of the wind that blows, each one has a specific name, and that name is associated with a particular deity. That is the beauty of Hinduism, that all powers of nature are deified. We just don't casually term them as storm and cloud, and even the stones, even the different objects that we see around us, they are manifestations of the same Lord. And we try to see the glory of the Lord. Everything should lead us to the Ishvara or the Lord. So that is the idea behind praising all the best among all the species. So among all the winds, I am Marichi. And among all nakshatras, I am the moon. Of course, moon is a planet, but nakshatra means those other than the bright lights, the cool lights that we see at night in the sky. Among them, the stars may be much brighter, or the planets may be much better, but brighter. But the moon is the most prominent, like the sun, which we can see and which sheds a lot of light. Maybe it is a reflected light, but still it is among all the heavenly bodies, I am the moon, or among nakshatra, among all the nakshatras, I am the moon. So then here, Aditya, the same Aditya, I mean, the whole of manifested universe, we have to remember, is the glory of Ishvara, but only the prominent ones, specimens he is telling us, because they will attract the attention of the person who is meditating on these vibhutis. He will meditate on the best possible species. Among the species, the best representation is what will attract everybody's attention, and we call them vibhutis of Ishvara. His vibhutis are infinite in number, but only a few are given. So Aditya assumes 12 names during the 12 months. For every month, there is a Aditya. So if it's a technical detail which I'll just mention here, but it's not very important. All you have to know is with every month, of course, you know that the months are also different in according to the English calendar and according to the Hindu calendar. So what is April? May not April and March, some portion of March and April will be 1 month. Some portion of April and May will be another month. So in general, if there are 12 months, all the different, there is a list of Adityas. Among them, Vishnu is also one. So Anshu, Dhata, Indra, Aryama, Vivasva, Bhaga, Parjanya, Dvashta, that is the list which is mentioned in the scriptures. Mitra, Vishnu, Varna and Pusha, they are the different Adityas. So they are connected with the different 12 months. So Aditya is somewhat, it is the first month. It is not exactly January, but the Hindu calendar begins with, every year it begins with the Aditya. So the Aditya with Vishnu. So Aditya of January is called Vishnu, and that is why people respect it, because for our hemisphere, people want the summer solstice to progressively remove the effects of winter. When we are tired of winter, we want the starting of summer, when days start becoming longer and longer. It is around January it happens in our part, in our hemisphere, where India is and all the other countries are in the northern hemisphere. So in the northern hemisphere, you will find that when after January, the days start becoming progressively bigger. So Vishnu is the Aditya for January. So even in the Vishnu Sahasranama, there are many names. There is the name Vishnu also there. Vishnu has hundreds of names, 1,000 names, Sahasranama. So it is attributed, actually, Aditya also means sun also, sun god. So Vishnu becomes Surya Narayana, as it is described, the commentary on Vishnu Sahasranama by Shankaracharya, which is ascribed to Shankaracharya, says that the 258th name in the whole Vishnu Sahasranama is dedicated to Vishnu, who is one of the Aditya, and then that's why people identify that Aditya as Surya Narayana. Himself has become sun because he becomes prominent as the months uh, pass. So then there are, according to the scriptures, there are 49 Maruts. These are all not very significant details, but there has been so much of elaborate discussion in our scriptures, in our Puranas especially. Upanishads don't go so deep, but the Puranas and the other ancillary scriptures, every natural phenomena is studied in its gross as well as subtle aspect. So they say there are 49 Marut or wind gods, different types of winds they have classified. For various reasons it has been done. And Marichi is supposed to be the foremost. That wind is supposed to do, they say the Malaya breeze, Thakur used to say, Malaya breeze, though it is just a myth, but still they believe that if the Malaya breeze blows, the ordinary trees become sandalwood. Of course, it is obviously not true, but that is how the glory of the breeze, the rivers, and we'll find everything glorified. And there are certain things which they have observed to be very prominent among all these natural objects or natural beings that we attribute the glory or vibhuti of the Lord to them. So Marichi is the foremost among the 49 Maruts, and the best of wind gods is therefore identified with Ishvara. Though the other gods are also part of Ishvara, not that only Marichi is, but because it is prominent, meditating on that, you get an idea. That is why they say one has to be very positive in our life. We can meditate on smaller things, negative things, but that pull us down. So this fault finding, as Holy Mother said, by seeing faults, you actually imbibe those faults yourself. So by thinking of the glory of the Lord, we also become the best. If we meditate on the positive side, the good side, the greatest side of the Lord. So that is one way of a positive approach to life. We meditate on the best that we see around us. Why should we look at filth? So Swami Ramakrishna used to say the Pandit thinks he is very intelligent as far as scriptures are concerned, and but his nature is like that of a kite. If he is not a morally good character, he flies very high. The kite flies very high, but its attitude or its focus is on the filth that is lying in the drain. So no matter how scholarly or how wonderful you are, if we identify with the worst things in creature, that is a tendency. Human beings have a tendency to see what is deficient everywhere. They don't see the positive side of everything. So this is a great psychological ploy which Arjuna or Sri Krishna is using to tell Arjuna because he started the whole Gita with a kind of depression. He had this Vishada. Vishada is a kind of depression which was not fit for him. He was a great warrior, and how can he be depressed just before the war? So Sri Krishna, through his Vibhuti Yoga and through all the verses of the Gita, gives a very strong and positive message to make him see and habituate himself by seeing only the positive side of the universe, the greatest side of the universe. If you have to see a specimen, see the biggest thing. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you go to a king, don't ask for pumpkins, ask for the highest treasure. You don't go to a king and ask him for silly things. So also when you meditate on the Lord, meditate on the best amongst Maruts, the best amongst the Adityas, the wind gods. And then why the sun, the luminary of the whole day, the most prominent and shining object is the sun. The foremost among the lighted things at night is the moon. among all the shining objects. During the day, you don't see the moon, obviously. The sun is the brightest object. Even if the moon is there, it will not, the sun will outshine the moon. But at night, when the sun sets, when the sun is no longer visible, then the moon becomes, the moonlight becomes a very visible and a strong light. So it is also known as Vibhuti. So among the luminaries at night, I am moon. Among the luminaries during the day, I am the sun. So these two heavenly bodies are viewed with veneration. We venerate them, we respect them, because they are the manifestations. Other stars, other luminous bodies are also manifested, but they are lesser manifestations. So when we have the highest manifestation, why go after the smaller things? That is the positivity that you see in the Gita. Then we come to the next verse 22, and I think we have 5 minutes, so I'll just wind up. We'll just discuss this. We'll start the discussion, but we will continue it in our next class. Verse number 22 of chapter number 10. Vedanam samavedo asmi, devanam asmi vasavaha, indriyanam manaschasmi, bhutanam asmi chetana. Now this is important because the Samaveda, because of its musical, it is supposed to be the best, because it is the chanter of the Samaveda is supposed to be, it is the best among the 4 Vedas, which is set to music. So there are Atharva Veda, Yajur Veda, everything can be chanted. But Samaveda has a beautiful music. It's the most musical among the other Vedas. That is why among all the 4 Vedas, I am the best, that is Samaveda. Vedanam Samaveda Asmi. Devanam, among all the gods, I am the Vasu. So Vasavaha, I mean Vasava is the name of Indra, not Vasu, Vasava. Vasava Asmi. Devanam, sorry, not Vasava, Vasava. Vasava is the name of Indra. So Devanam Vasava Asmi. So among all the gods, Indra is of course supposed to be the Lord of Devas. We have a Lord of Asuras, and similarly we have Lord of Devas. So by sheer merit, Devas are, the idea of Deva literally means the shining ones. Why shining ones? They are the ruling, presiding deity of the different functions that you see in nature. So among them, the ruler of all the Devas is known as Indra, the Lord of the Devas. So by sheer merit, the deserving ones among the Devas rise to the position of Indra. And since all the merits which these Devas have are the glories of the Lord, we take the highest among the Devas, Indra, and say that they are the glory. His glory is the glory of Ishvara. Though it is partial, but it expresses then functioning of all the 5 senses. Now Indriyanam, I mean Indriyas are 5 senses. Now I'm not talking of the Karmendriya here, because the input is given through the 5 Gyanendriyas. So among the Gyanendriyas, no doubt smell, sight, and all those smell, sight, sound, ears, all these are inputs which we receive. Jnana, we get jnana through these inputs, the 5 senses. They become purposeless if they are not somehow connected to the mind. If the mind is not attached, the senses will see things, but it will not be evaluate or make use of these things. Some coherency has to be there, and it is the mind which unites. You see certain things, you hear certain things, you smell certain things, and the input comes, but you have to make sense of what inputs you get. Otherwise, you will be like a person who has, for some reason, his mind is not functioning. He will see everything like like somebody is looking at things in a coma or a partial coma, where he will be seeing things, but nothing is registering because the function of the mind has been disturbed. So if the mind, or even if the mind wanders, sometimes you appear to be listening to certain things or appear to be seeing certain things, but you are lost because your mind is not attached to what you are seeing. So that alertness has, for a moment, it has gone. That is why many times when you listen to talks, you are hearing, but the mind for a moment wanders and then you feel, "Arey, what did I hear just now? It just slipped." The reason is the mind was not attached. So the absent-minded man clearly knows the importance of mind. We say mind was absent. Absent-minded word itself means that throughout the day, the senses are totally active. But if the mind is not attached to this indriya, so that is why the Lord says, mind being the recorder, it records all these wonderful sensations. It is the most glorious, it gives the glory to the five senses. By themselves, they are not so important. They are important, no doubt, but the main among them, the main sense, that is why in some Vedantic schools, mind is also taken up as a Gyanendriya, because it is also subtle. Its sense organs have their gross and subtle aspects. So also the mind has the gross mind and the subtle mind, the buddhi and all those things. So anyway, it is considered to be an attribute of the Lord, Ishvara, because mind is far superior than all the five sense organs. Now, difference between living and dead is, if a dead person is there, is this presence of consciousness. The more evolved the being, the clearer is the consciousness in him. If the consciousness is more manifest, for example, in the reactive mind or manas, the light of the consciousness is less reflected. That is why we call it is a tamasic mind, a jada mind. It doesn't respond. Whereas the buddhi, when it gets sharpened, when more and more of consciousness is reflected in the mind, it assumes a sattvic state. So, but ultimately it is the pure consciousness which is equated to God. But when we say, when we see that among all the beings, I am the conscious being, that is what he is saying. I am the, among all the senses, I am the mind, and among the living beings, I am the consciousness which is behind them. Because it is the degree of consciousness in different beings that makes it more and more nearer to the glory of the Lord. The more conscious a person is, the less conscious he is, the more gross he becomes. And the more conscious he becomes, the more subtle, and he goes on evolving. That person becomes spiritually more and more evolved. And the highest spiritual evolution is to the evolved man who is full of prajna or the consciousness. They, in him the Lord is revealed more. So when you say who is more spiritual, that is why Sri Ramakrishna, and I will close with this. We are almost coming to the end of our time. So Sri Ramakrishna says, what more can I bless you with? I don't know what higher blessing can there be, except for saying that may your consciousness be awakened. Tomader Chaitanya Hok. So this consciousness, because it is equated with Ishvara, it is equated with Ishvara because it is the true nature of reality. The more, the less conscious, the less the consciousness is reflected. For example, in the gross body, the consciousness is less. In the prana, it is slightly more. In the body, in the mind, it is slightly more. In the buddhi, it is still more, being nearest to the Atman. The buddhi is supposed to be fully sattvic, but still, pure consciousness is a step higher. So that is why it is known as a vibhuti, one of the vibhutis. So next we will come with other vibhutis, 23rd verse, Rudranam, Shankaras, Chasmi, and all those things we will discuss in the next class. So if there are some questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we will close for today. Questions based on today's discussion. Please restrict yourself to that. I think we can have one question at the most. So Maharaj, I think there's no question, at least in the chat.